Welcome back to my 10 favorite people. Hope you're doing well. I'm incredibly excited for today's video because it's crazy how well Bitcoin continues to follow the path we outlined just a few months ago. And it does feel like everything is lining up perfectly here for a big finale move over the next few weeks. Whether you take a look at on-chain indicators like the short-term holder cost basis model that tells us that Bitcoin is beginning to heat up here but has not reached the overheated level quite yet, or if you take a look at a market sentiment via the fear and greed index, it's telling us that excitement is really starting to build up here as we go deeper into the greed region, but we still haven't entered the extreme greed area that represents euphoria and marks out Bitcoin's local tops usually. And same thing if we take a look at seasonality. So far, July has been right in line with expectations with a return of just over 10%. And in post-halving years like the one we're in this year, usually a bullish July results in a very bullish August. Same thing in 2017 and same thing in 2013. So because of our current momentum and the fact that I'm expecting a bullish July, it does seem like we could be gearing up for a final blow off top move to around the high 130,000s or even 140,000. And it's great that those price targets align almost perfectly with our very expensive region here on the Is It a Good Time to Buy Bitcoin chart that looks at our extension from the 200-week moving average, which is where Bitcoin tends to bottom during its bear markets. I'm happy to continue taking small profits in the expensive region, but I will start taking profits more aggressively if we get over 150% extended from the 200-week moving average, because the downside risk increases quite significantly if that happens. And I know hearing price targets like 130K and 140K are very underwhelming when other people are promising 200K Bitcoin or 300K or 500K Bitcoin this cycle. As an investor, I think it's better to be cautious and get surprised by upside than be overly optimistic and get caught off guard by downside. And that brings us to my portfolio. I took a decent amount of profit on just my Ethereum holdings on Monday. It was incredibly difficult to do because it has been skyrocketing recently, and it went from being the most hated asset when we were holding it and buying it, and now it's become the most loved asset overnight. But I reminded myself that my most difficult sales in the past were the best ones, the same way my most difficult purchases were the best ones, like when we were buying during all of the tariff drama in April. And this is exactly why I called Monday's free weekly report sticking to the strategy. It's really easy to plan things and to have a good strategy when things are calm, but it's very hard to stick to your strategy when there's all of these narratives and aggressive price movements in either direction. And as always, if you'd like to learn more about my portfolio automation system or mental models I use to navigate this market, you can check out the Crypto Enjoyers program and community in the video description. There you can see the first part of my portfolio system, which is my crypto story, as well as the mental model I use for decision making in this market and some reviews of some members that are already inside. But the good news here is that if you are very nervous about the top being in, we have a very clear invalidation level at about 109K. If Bitcoin were to fall back below there and close below there on a weekly closing basis, it would be a huge warning sign that the top is in and the cycle is over, because Bitcoin should not be retracing a breakout like that with everything that's going on with the ETF inflows and Bitcoin treasuries and the current excitement and narrative. A fall back below that level would be a huge warning sign, just like it was when we had that false breakout in January of this year, or in November of 2021, or April of 2021, or even April of 2022. False breakouts tend to be a huge warning sign when it comes to Bitcoin, especially on the weekly chart. But as of right now, ETF inflows are still looking pretty solid. We saw some profit taking recently, but compared to the inflows that preceded it, it's almost negligible. Strategy is still buying hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin and even came up with a new offering they're going to be using to buy even more Bitcoin over the next few weeks. And we have Trump's media company reporting $2.5 billion in fundraising to acquire Bitcoin as well. As for Ethereum, still a very solid looking chart with a clean weekly close well above our range mid at 3,400. So our next target is the range high at 4,000. Some chop and consolidation around here is normal after the incredible move we've seen over the past few weeks, and I'm still expecting upside over the next few weeks for Ethereum. We're still seeing incredible inflows coming into these Ethereum ETFs, and they brought in over $500 million just yesterday, extending their 13-day inflow streak to over $4 billion. And you can see it visualized here just how insane these inflows have been, even compared to what we saw in late 2024, right after the election, when Ethereum rallied all the way up to 4,000. Those inflows were less than a third than the inflows we're seeing right now. And we still have Sharplink Gaming buying hundreds of millions of dollars of Ethereum and trying to be Ethereum's MicroStrategy. Don't know if any other companies are going to follow suit, but it's a very strong narrative because investors saw what happened with MicroStrategy and Bitcoin, so they're pattern matching that to Ethereum and trying to front run these flows. Ethereum Bitcoin also looks pretty solid. We have a low, a higher low, a high, and a higher high for the first time in a very long time, and maintaining above the 50-week moving average here would be huge. As for Solana, pretty ugly rejection off of its range high around $200 as of right now. We really want to see it close above that level if we're going to retest the all-time high at 300. And we still have a few days before the weekly close to try and fix the big wick on this weekly candle. Solana's on-chain data is looking pretty solid, and we've seen a huge increase in transactions recently. Its TVL is still second to only Ethereum, and it still acts as the perfect Ethereum hedge in my portfolio, in my opinion, to see who the smart contract winner is going to be. The Solana treasury company DeFi Development Corp keeps buying more Solana and has reached $200 million in holdings. Again, this is nothing compared to what Ethereum and Bitcoin are seeing, but Solana is a much smaller market cap, and the most important thing is the narrative that's bringing in more investors. And of course, you can never have bullish price action without some insane price targets. Apparently, Solana's price is painting a textbook chart pattern for a potential rally to $6,000 per Solana. And what is that textbook chart pattern, you may ask? It's everybody's favorite chart pattern right alongside Head and Shoulders, the cup and handle. And now the cup and handle formation is not a bad technical pattern by any means. The danger is I see people all over Twitter applying it to a logarithmic scale when it's supposed to be used on a linear scale. So how the cup and handle formation works is you take the size of the cup, which in this case is $240, and you apply it to the breakout, which would give us a Solana target of about 480. But because it's being applied to a logarithmic scale here, it's calling for a $6,000 Solana. And this, of course, brings a ton of engagement to the post and makes a lot of new retail market participants incredibly excited. So we'll see what happens for Solana. Right now, Solana Bitcoin doesn't look too bad as long as we fix this wick. It does look like a double bottom similar to the one that we got during the bear market where Solana bottomed against Bitcoin, but we want to see a breakout above this recent high and getting above these major moving averages to really flip this trend. And speaking of flipping the trend, for the first time in a very long time, Solana and Ethereum are positive on a 1-year rolling basis. Hopefully that trend can continue and we can finally see some real gains on these assets and they don't just roll over back into negative territory. But of course, altcoin price action is going to rely very heavily on what Bitcoin decides to do. But as long as Bitcoin stays above 109K, chopping around and consolidating is fine and will be very good for altcoins. The good news is that the global liquidity index is saying that Bitcoin can rally a bit higher over the next few weeks until about September. It's only a matter of time before the US dollar index has a major bounce, in my opinion, and that's going to put huge downward pressure on global liquidity and could mark where Bitcoin ends up finding its top. I know there's so many people out there that believe the market can't top anytime soon because we haven't even gotten rate cuts yet, but it's important to remember that markets are forward looking and they price things in a way in advance. So if we know rate cuts are coming, then the markets definitely know that and have definitely priced it in, at least in terms of the data that's already available. And speaking of economic data, we still have stubborn inflation and we still have a relatively resilient labor market and we still have positive growth. And the S&P 500 is still making new highs, which is a great backdrop for Bitcoin. So I don't see a lot of reason for aggressive rate cuts from the Fed quite yet. But as we look forward at the longer term, the federal government is still running huge deficits and that trend seems to be worsening, especially with the passing of the big, beautiful bill recently. Exponential debt growth means exponential money supply growth and currency debasement, which should be a bullish tailwind for our risk assets like the S&P 500 and definitely bullish for our fixed supply risk assets like Bitcoin. But as always, let me know what you expect. Thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.